How do I start a ministry to witness to Jehovah's Witnesses? Welcome to the JW Review. So I'm so excited to be doing this. This is the first ever episode of the JW Review. And before we get into the topic, I just want to kind of introduce myself and also this podcast and what I intend to do. My name is Mike Felker. I am really interested in apologetics, in particular the beliefs and practices of the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I also am involved in studying other religious groups and also maybe those who might consider themselves not religious, such as atheists and skeptics and whatnot. My primary ministry, if you will, is not what I do here on the internet per se, although this is something I want to be a big part of it. But I also lead a group at a local college called Ratio Christi. If you're not familiar with Ratio Christi, look it up. It's a really awesome ministry to be involved in. It's actually an apologetics ministry geared towards equipping college students to defend their faith in college. So with that said, what is the JW Review going to be about? Well, really, we're just going to examine the beliefs and practices of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So we're going to primarily be dealing with their theology, but also maybe be talking about their practices, their culture, their history and whatnot. But why do a podcast like this? Well, really because no such podcast exists. There's a lot of videos about Jehovah's Witnesses online, and I've contributed to quite a number of those, but there's not really a podcast, something that just regularly deals with this on an in-depth level, or really any level at all. Now, there might be other ministries that tackle the subject every now and then, but the reason I wanted to do this is because there was nothing like this for me. I really would love to have a podcast that comes out occasionally on my podcast feed where I can just listen to on my way to work or going home or just being in the car. But no such thing exists. So I'm here to provide that to you if that's something that you really enjoy. So we're going to go through particular topics. I'm going to have a certain agenda that I'm going to go by, just kind of based on topics that I feel are really interesting and maybe topics that aren't really discussed as much. But maybe you have some questions, maybe you have some topics that you want discussed. So if you do have a topic or a question that you want me to address, please feel free to reach out to me and ask me, and I would love to cover that on this podcast. So the subject for this episode is going to be how to start a ministry to Jehovah's Witnesses. And this topic sparked my interest because it was asked of me. You know, people were asking me how I got started on this, as far as just reaching out to Jehovah's Witnesses and just trying to share the truth with them. So a little bit of background as far as how I got involved into this before I get into the how-tos. This is what happened with me. In a nutshell, I was involved in a research project for my degree program in my undergrad. And basically part of the research was to find a group not of my own and find out what their beliefs and practices are concerning the afterlife. So we got to choose, and I chose the Jehovah's Witnesses. So to make a long story short, essentially I reached out to Jehovah's Witnesses, I interviewed them, I did research on their beliefs and practices concerning the afterlife, and one thing led to another, and then I got involved with doing book studies with them, where you get a publication such as this one, and we go through it, and we talk, and they try to share their beliefs with me, and I share my beliefs with them, and that lasted a pretty long time with a number of different Jehovah's Witnesses. And then eventually I made my way to doing this on the internet, just so I could have a wider audience to reach. So that's really how I got involved. Now, this video is about how you can get involved in doing that if that's something that you want to get into. So there's maybe 4 different options that I try to figure out as far as what did I do and also what do other people do. And these are not all recommended, by the way. These are just ones I came up with just to show you the options that are out there. So the first one is you can reach out to Jehovah's Witnesses on the internet. There's plenty of them on the internet. All you really have to do is make a video like this, maybe start posting on Facebook and Twitter, going to message boards and forums, Facebook groups, whatever it might be. You're going to find Jehovah's Witnesses if you look hard enough, and if you start talking about a subject that they are going to want to kind of reach out and try to get a hold of and interact with you. So for example, you could go on a message board and just post a topic on something that is interesting. Maybe it's a question about Jehovah's Witnesses that you've always wanted to ask. So you could ask that question, and then you could begin your interaction. So if you want some recommendations as far as which message boards to jump onto and to interact, send me a personal message and I can maybe give you a few recommendations. Now, that type of ministry is not always very fruitful because a lot of times, or maybe most of the time, Jehovah's Witnesses don't really tell you who they are. They don't tell you their name, where they're from, anything like that. So you're going to be really interacting with just a pseudonym on the internet. And the reason that's not rewarding is because you might talk to someone and never hear from them again. So the seed that you plant, you may not get to see the result if that seed decides to grow through God's providence and through His work of the Holy Spirit. You may just not see that. So it's not always a very rewarding ministry. However, it can be. And so I've actually had some pretty fruitful interactions on the internet, not just with Jehovah's Witnesses, but also with struggling Jehovah's Witnesses. So if you can find one of those, someone who's maybe in the process of trying to seek out something beyond their organization because they start to see that things are wrong and they become a little more vulnerable and they reach out to you to maybe get your opinion on some different perspectives. So that's one thing you can do, is reach out on the internet. The second one, and I don't recommend this one, but you can go to their events. You can go to their district or regional conventions. You can get out there and you can just preach out loud to them, share what you believe the truth is. Now, when you do that, don't expect any Jehovah's Witness to reach out to you and talk to you. In fact, if you do that and you try to reach out to someone around you after they just saw you preaching out loud, they're probably just going to ignore you. They're not going to want to talk to you. That's just not something that they do. So you could try that if you want to, but I don't recommend it. But some people do that. And also some people hold out signs. And I've actually heard some positive things happen by holding up a sign. Maybe you have a sign that says something like, I don't know, if you want the truth, go to this website. I've heard of Jehovah's Witnesses doing that, just being like, I wonder what that website is that person with a picket sign is trying to tell me about. I don't really recommend that approach. Something good can come out of it, maybe, but it's just not the approach that I recommend. Now, one approach that I do recommend, and this is the one that I did, is you can actually show up at the Kingdom Hall. Yeah, you can just show up. You can just show up on a Sunday morning or one of their weeknight meetings. Believe it or not, those events are actually open to anyone. So you can show up and they will, I promise you, they will warmly welcome you. And you can just kind of go from there. So you can, now I wouldn't just go in there just trying to start arguments and whatnot. I would go in there, observe, get to know people, maybe find someone and say, hey, would you like to go out for coffee, or would you like to come over to my house for dinner and make a meal for them? And they would probably be overjoyed that you would offer such an invitation. Or you can just kind of show up, and as you keep showing up, you can just listen to things that are said at the meetings, and you can just ask questions about some of the things you heard. Maybe something that you disagreed with. You could bring that up to a Jehovah's Witness that you're sitting next to And then they can just kind of go on from there. Because that's exactly what I did, except I was kind of going into the meeting with the intention of doing academic research. But the same kind of thing can happen. You can just go in there and say, hey, I've heard a lot about your religion, and I'm just here just to observe and just ask some questions because I'm really curious about what your organization teaches. And so you can go on from there, and you can be more vulnerable, more open, more honest about the fact that, yeah, you do have some disagreements, and you can be even more upfront than that and just say, hey, you know what? I'm really interested in just getting to know you and sharing with you about what I believe the Bible teaches. Would you like to have a discussion about that? And they would most likely love to do that. So yes, show up to a Kingdom Hall, maybe show up to even one of their conventions. They would love to have you, and that's a great opportunity for you to reach out to a Jehovah's Witness and just really build a relationship with them. Now, the last one is probably the easiest because they're going to just come to you probably once a year, maybe more often than that. So if you live maybe in a place where Jehovah's Witnesses come to, like just a house in a neighborhood, you're more than likely this year going to get visited by a Jehovah's Witness. And, you might not be home when they show up. That's okay. They're probably going to come back again that year until they've actually made eye-to-eye or face-to-face contact with you. So just wait on them. They're going to show up, and when they show up, don't just go immediately and trying to attack them or challenge them and whatnot. Just sit back and listen to what they have to say. Because they're going to maybe talk to you about a topic that, maybe you're not interested in. Maybe it's not that exciting. But regardless, listen to them. They're going to probably ask you a question and just entertain the question. Start a conversation. Don't think that in that conversation you've got to talk about everything that you have always wanted to challenge a Jehovah's Witness on. Don't have that kind of agenda. Just listen and just answer the questions. And then by the end of the conversation, ask them a question that you think is going to raise an eyebrow and really kind of pique their curiosity. So I'll give you an example. Just a few weeks ago, actually, I had some Jehovah's Witnesses at my door. And maybe I'll do another podcast episode talking about these particular interactions. So by the end of the conversation, I remembered something they said. They said that they base all of their beliefs on the Bible. And so I just asked them, so I heard you say earlier that you base all of your beliefs on the Bible. Is that what you said? And of course they said, yeah, we do. We base everything that we teach on the Scriptures. I said, okay, great. So I heard that you teach something about 1919 and about your leaders getting chosen by Jesus. And I'm really interested in that. Can you explain that belief to me from the Bible? Now, that's going to be a really interesting question to them, because if they're anything like the older Jehovah's Witnesses that came to my door, they've probably never heard anyone at the door ask such a question. And so they're going to be really interested in A, wondering how they're going to really explain this really complex doctrine to you, but B, why would you be asking such a question? That's something really deep, and that's maybe not something that even Jehovah's Witnesses think about every day. So why is this guy asking me this question about 1919? Do they have some kind of agenda, or are they an ex-Jehovah's Witness? A lot of stuff's going to be going through their head, but they're going to want to come back, and they're going to want to have a meeting with you discussing that belief. Now, that can really trickle into something really interesting. They're going to come back to you, and they're going to be well prepared to discuss that belief with you, and that can really trickle down into a lot of in-depth discussions that can be really beneficial in you reaching them and challenging their most core beliefs about their leadership. And you can really plant a seed with that kind of interaction. Now, it doesn't have to be 1919, but I would recommend bringing up a doctrine that's a little bit deeper and something that's going to really pique their interest. I wouldn't recommend just asking them a question about the Trinity or hell or something like that. Maybe ask a question about why only 144,000 partake of the bread and wine. Why doesn't all the Jehovah's Witnesses do that if they believe they're obeying Jesus' command to do this in remembrance of me? So ask a question like that. Ask something a little more peculiar that they're not going to really expect, because that's most likely going to turn into a return visit. So that's 4 different ways that you can start a ministry with Jehovah's Witnesses.